Okay, so what I really want, I want this thing to run as sort of an open forum for you guys. If you guys have questions, you guys just want to understand there's a lot of questions out there. I want you guys to stand up and just ask a question, okay? I'll send a rant, I'm going to go on and talk about a whole bunch of things. And when you guys ask one, I'll probably cover a lot of other topics also. Michelle gave me some pre-loaded questions that she emailed me as well, and I'm going to kind of go through those and pick up on all those points also. So, I'm Davd Lomaglio. You guys do not have to call me David or Mr. Lomaglio or Doctor or anything. I'm David, and I'm not a professor. It's fine. I am married to Melanie. You guys all know Melanie. We have been married for 16 years now, and I graduated from here in 1999. When I started school here, it was over at a strip mall on US 1, and they didn't own this property, and then they bought this property, and it was a big joke that we were at university, trailer at the time, and we had all the models out there. And then they built this nice big building, and I didn't have any resources, but I was really lucky to go here back then and graduate, and I've had a good career since then. A couple of statistics, I used to do this lecture, I would do it for the management class, and I haven't really done it in a few semesters. I didn't want to go into that whole lecture. And honestly, I didn't want to put a PowerPoint or do a whole bunch of stuff here for today. I just come here and talk to you guys about it. But I was doing some research and I saw a couple of really interesting numbers. In 2014, Forbes magazine listed physical therapists as one of the top 10 in-demand jobs in the United States. And I apologize if a lot of it's PT, a lot of the info is out there. I guarantee this crosses the OT as well. CNN Money in 2012 listed physical therapy as one of the top 10 most growing jobs in the U.S. The U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics in 2013 said they expect a 36% increase in physical therapy jobs between 2012 and 2022. So if you guys had any questions, so if you guys had any question, if you made the right career choice, I would put that in the back of your mind right now. I guarantee you guys made a good choice. I was kind of a little bit astonished to see all those numbers we talked about. It's awesome, for the future and what's going to happen here in the United States. A lot of that's obviously because of increased resources, and they're pushing people into healthcare and they're giving more healthcare to people. A lot of it is because we're trying to cut down on specialists and how much money they spend on specialists. And I really think there's an avenue for PTs and OTs to be an entry point into the healthcare system. The PCPs are the entry point now, and they really push that to the point that the U.S. government is paying for people to become family practitioners and reimbursement for reimbursement. And I think that PT and OT is going to go that same route. We're a very logical entry point into the healthcare system. I think I just saw that, and I think it was the state of Florida, that now it used to be 21 days direct access, and now it's 30 days, which is awesome. And it's a big step in the right direction. Direct access is fantastic for us. I just want to pop those numbers out to you guys, and then another number that I saw that I thought was interesting is the APTA just did a salary survey that came out in 2013, and I actually got surveyed. They would reach out to business owners and things like that, and the median salary for physical therapists right now is $85,000. So it's a pretty good salary when you get out there. Now, you guys aren't going to be worth that when you get out there, but I mean, that's across the board. That's New York City, and that's, Hotel, Florida, and things like that. So it varies, and it depends on whether or not you're in acute care or home health and things like that. But that's a pretty darn good median salary getting out and having the opportunity to make money like that, and you can make a decent living like that. My background is I graduated from here in 1999. Melanie and I moved to Florida together. I worked for a great outpatient practice in Florida. The first practice I worked for down there was in Vail. It was an awful experience. It was good for a new grad for me because it was really into the fire. I mean, I was seeing 2-3 patients an hour. I would have a new patient and another patient there at the same time, and it was kind of, it was just right into the frying pan. They learned how to become a therapist right now. Then I moved to a really good practice where I saw one patient now. And I can tell you that one patient now was kind of boring. You get to the point where you're almost functioning as sort of a trainer. It was almost overkill to have this one patient an hour. And we moved to Washington State. It was a great job. My boss was awesome. fantastic guy, and really introduced me to a lot of, I guess, kind of the ethics and the morals that I hopefully carried on afterwards going into practice. We moved to Washington State after there, but she did her degree. I had an opportunity to run into outpatient practice, and I put in a 45-minute patient care model inside that practice. And it really worked. And they were talking to the owner of practice, and he's like, I didn't think it would work, but it does work. And I think there's multiple reasons why it works. I think one, you have more time with your patients, and I think what happens is your patients come in more. They come in on a regular basis, they appreciate the rapport that you develop with them, and they're going to show up for their appointments. It really makes a big difference. I think two, you have time to really develop that relationship with the patient, and what happens then is they go back to the doctor, they tell the doctor what a great time they had at physical therapy, how wonderful it was, how they appreciated that you thought about them and you really tried hard to get them better. And they go back and they tell the doctor that, the doctor sends you more patients, and you jump on the boat. And for that reason, I do think it's a very viable model right now. There's a couple of practices. First, rehab functions like this. Then Jackson functions like this also with that model in place. And right now here in town, we're the only 3 that are in town doing that. But I'll tell you that in late 2007, none of these 3 practices existed. Okay, First Coast Rehab didn't exist yet. I didn't exist yet, and Dr. Jackson didn't ever practice yet. She was working at rehab, she does not follow this model. And since then, these 3 practices have opened up. Now, the population of St. Augustine has not grown exponentially, but we average probably 615 patients a month. I know Dr. Jackson averages 700 patients a month at least, and I guarantee First Coast downstairs is around that 7 to probably 800 mark also. So if you think about that, that's over 2,000 visits a month. The 3 practices that have opened up in the past 7 years have now gotten that are going to their practices. So if you just think about that, what is the public really looking for? And what are referral sources really looking for? We're looking for models that are like ours. Now, hopefully, it's a viable model going on from today. Healthcare pressure and reimbursement rates really start to cycle that just a little bit. And that's my biggest fear going forward. And that's why I talk to my clinicians about, if anything's going to push us out of that model, it's going to be because we can't make it up. We can't profit making that model. I can't pay you guys on that model. I can't pay you $85,000 a year if I'm only getting $42 when we see a patient for 45 minutes. The numbers no longer work out. So, we just have to watch healthcare. Healthcare is changing dramatically right now. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So when I ran a practice out west, I had an opportunity to manage a practice and got into that. When we moved back here to town, that's kind of when I got this 45-minute idea. I worked here in town for a couple different practices. And then with Melanie having a really good job here in town, I decided that if we were going to stay here, that I was going to have to go and open up my own practice. We have to do something on our own. And that's basically what pushed us to open it. So we opened up in June of 2009. And if you asked me in 2010, 11, or 12, I probably would have told you it was a bad idea. But at this point, I would tell you it's probably the best idea and the best decision that we've ever made to open up our own practice. I think we've made it through that sort of breaking point in the beginning where it's killing you. In fact, I used to do this lecture, and there was a phase there where my lectures got a little bit negative for a while. And I was just right in the middle of, gosh, this is horrendous, and I would go 3 days in a row and not see my children, and you're working 13 hours a day, and 75 hours a week, and is this really worth it? And you get mixed up with it, and I'm not seeing my wife, or I'm spending time with her, and you get mixed up right in the middle of all that. And then, I feel like we've kind of made it out on the other side at this point, and it was certainly worked at this point. And I would highly encourage anybody who wants to go to private practice to go into private practice. There's not a lot of private practitioners out there. I tried to find new data on it. The most recent number that I had was from a lecture that I took probably back in 2008. And the number that was put out to me was that less than 14% of physical therapists are in outpatient private practice, and that number is even less for occupational therapists. So there's not a lot of us in outpatient private practice. It's like the only solo business avenue of it. If you think about it, 86% of therapists are working for another environment. Acute care, a nursing home, they might be doing home health. They're doing something else other than this outpatient private practice. there probably are some home health agencies that are run by physical therapists, but it's not a lot. So other than that, none of these people are in business for themselves. They're all working for somebody else. So I'm a big believer that you guys come out of school, and the majority may go to school with this employee mentality inside your head. You're going to get out, you're going to go work for somebody else, and that's going to be what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And in private practice, it's completely different than that. And you've got to get out of the employee mentality. And one of the things I try to do with my employees in my home is get them out of that mentality, try to make them understand that, you're here, you're working for an outpatient private practice now. When you come in and you don't have a patient here, well, there's no revenue coming in for that. I have OCD and I am a perfectionist. And so I run every single number in there. And I can tell you that every single spot on my schedule that's on the schedule costs me $62. So that means when there's a slot on my therapist schedule, it costs $62. And I tell my therapist that, I'm like, look, that's $62. So we average $73 a patient. So every time you see a patient, you profit us $11. But every time you have a no-show or cancel, I'm paying you $62 going out the door right there that I've got coming in. So basically, that means you have to see 5 patients to offset every one empty slot that's on your schedule. And we meet about this, and we talk about this, because I've got to get them out of the employee mentality and make them buy into what we're doing there. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And I've been very, very lucky in my practice. For the most part, I've made really good hires going through where I've been in business. And I've got a good staff, they work hard for me, and I try to do a good job, and I try to take care of them as best as I can. And we've been lucky that way, and I wouldn't be able to run a business if it didn't run that way. Right now, we have got, I probably typically do 25 hours a week in the clinic of actual patient care, but a lot of times it ends up being more than that. And then I've got 2 full-time therapists who do 40 hours a week. I've got another therapist that does 29 hours a week, and another therapist that does basically around 10 hours a week. So I'm not sure how many hours that exactly is, but we've got a lot of hours that are floating around out there in the practice. Again, we run a 45-minute schedule. I run kind of what I like to call a micro practice, and I try to keep costs down everywhere that you can possibly keep costs down. I have 1 receptionist. I do not have a tech running around. Therapists clean up after themselves. They do their own ultrasounds. They run their own patients through their exercise programs. By the way, if you were a tech at a facility and you were doing ultrasound and you were running through your exercise programs and your therapist was going for it, that's illegal. You've got a good patient, it's called fraud. I guarantee they knew what they were doing. And if it is Blue Cross Blue Shield or a private insurance company, it's definitely outside of CPT regulations. So a lot of practices run that way. I know I worked for a practice in Tallahassee that ran that way too. I didn't know any better at the time. It's no harm, no foul on you, but it's the business owner and the therapist who shouldn't be billing, and that's not billable time. All CPT codes are one-on-one codes. They're one-on-one. That's the way that they all run. If you have 2 patients in there at one time, it's not one-on-one anymore. You're splitting your time between those 2 patients. So that's why we run on a 45-minute basis. And there's other things. The AMA has got special billing guidelines we can use for private insurance companies, but for Medicare and government payers, you run by the 8-minute rule. If anybody here heard about the 8-minute rule, maybe you guys run by the 8-minute rule. So it's 8, 23, 38, 53, and it runs on from there, and so on from there. So again, we really try to run a micro practice. I do not have an office manager. I have a fantastic billing person that works in my office, and she's the type of person who will come to me with solutions, not the problem. She'll walk up to me and she'll say, I need to collect $11 more from them, but it's going to cost you $16 to collect this, and you need to write it off. And she's somebody that I can just say, do whatever you want, I trust you, and just let me know. And if I decide to check, just give me a check and write it. And she's been a savior for our business. I need to outsource our billing, which is kind of a good way to do it when you first start. But when I bring billing in-house, it's like the best decision we've ever made as a business. Getting her in there and getting it competent, efficient, another OCD type-based perfectionist in there to do your billing, and it worked out perfect for us. It's really a great decision. Again, I got 1 person that works at my desk. I've got 1 guy who kind of functions as a tech. He does laundry. But all the therapists do laundry also. When there's not laundry around, we're not about laundry. I do laundry when I'm in there. He comes in and he works like 10 hours a week. And the only way that, and you can see how many hours I have there as therapists. So we run fairly efficiently. My therapist we run at like 83% productivity. My therapists all know how to bill very efficiently. So we're getting reimbursed for the time that they're in there. But you can see the staff that I run on and how many therapists I have there. And the only way that this would be a profitable business for me was to run it the way that it is right now. Otherwise, it would not be possible. If I had an office manager, it all goes out the door right there. Okay, I'm office manager right here. I'll go in and do clinical work during the day. If I have a chance to do administrative work, I do it. And at night, I sit on the couch next to my wife, who's also working all day long every day. And I'll sit there and do all my admin stuff, or I'll go over books, or I'll do graphs and charts and look over stuff, look for productivity. That's my stuff that I do every night. And if you're going to run a model on a 45-minute basis, it's the only way that I think that it's going to be viable. You've got it. That's your profit right there. That's your time, but that's also your profit. It's the only way that it bumps up and becomes worth your while. We don't have a small profit. We did almost 700 visits that last month. That's a decent sized practice. And you know, I guarantee you, we're not chilling it and murdering it. The days of murdering it and the therapists are gone. But you know, we can make comfortable living, but only because I do all this stuff on the side also, all my admin work and all that stuff also. We've got our hands in a couple other things. I've got a great contract at Northrop Grumman, which builds airplanes out up by the airport. And that's been a contract that I've had for 3 years now. It's a fantastic contract. And actually last year, we were asked to bid on and take over the medical management for that practice, for the Northrop Grumman also. So the nurses out there and the medical director out there actually are employees of mine now also. And that's fantastic. You know, anything that you can get in that goes above and beyond just going to practice, you need to try to get your hands in there. There's another way to get other income into your practice that you're not relying on insurance reimbursement. You're sketchy, you never know when they're going to pay you, they're always going to try to find a reason not to pay you. That's basically the game they run. We have recently, we're going to start to see patients, or I'm certified, I enjoy playing golf, I'm certified with Titleist, and as a performance instructor, so I've developed a good relationship with Marsh Creek Country Club. So we are going to start to see patients out of Marsh Creek. I've developed a relationship with them. We're going to go to Marsh Creek and start to see patients there 2 days a week as well. So just the idea is trying to branch out and always trying to grow. When I first opened up the practice, I had lunch with a doctor here in town, and this is basically when we first opened up, and I loved into it, and he told me something then that kind of stuck in my head. He's like, if you're not growing, you're shrinking. Like if you're not always trying to figure out other ways to do things to get stuff in, he's like, you're going to die, you're going to go away, you're going to fade out. So you're always going to do that. Which is a little bit stressful, you know, it's a little bit stressful to like fight off a project and then get on top of that project and be like, here's my next project, what am I going to do now? And it gets a little bit fatiguing sometimes and you're not mentioned, but it's certainly been worth it. And like, I think in my head that there's going to come a point where everything's just running and I can just go to work and do my job and go home and not have to worry about it. And I think there's going to come at some point, I'm convinced that it is. That kind of keeps me going every day. And hopefully that does end up being the case at some point where I can just go, you kind of work 40 hours a week or maybe even like 30, 35 hours a week and make a decent living doing that. And that's the ultimate goal of getting into the whole thing. So we opened up practice, and I sent Michelle a couple of books already, and I'll pass them around to you guys. But there's a couple books that I started with. This is Starting Managing Your Own Physical Therapy Practice. It's like a child's book written by this guy, Sam Esterson, who has a bunch of practices up in Maryland. It's a very easy read. I read it in like a day. There's a lot of good information inside there. It's very, very simple. It just simplifies starting up a business. On the physical therapy side, if you can do it, you should take this course, How to Start a Private Practice. Okay, every CSM has got this course. They're probably out at other times too. Peter McMiniman is one of the prime authors on this. I actually met a couple of people. This manual right here, there's like 13 different authors that put into this manual. Julie Ellis, you'll see her name in here also. I actually met her at a CSM in 2008 and talked to her. I sat down and talked to her. I went to a private practice meeting and I sat down and had lunch with this woman. I've never met her before. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm really thinking about going out and I want to open up a private practice. And she just sat down and took the time to talk to me, as most practitioners will. Again, because our numbers are really low. We only make up 14% or less of what's out there in private practice. the more numbers we have, the stronger it will be. Managerial supervisory principles for PT. This is going to go for anybody who's in the management position. That's good more on the management side, not necessarily for starting your own practice, but if you're going to be in an avenue where you are maybe going to have people working underneath you in a hospital or a nursing home or another facility, that's good. Other resources I used when I started up are the Small Business Development Center at cdc.gov and the Small Business Administration, SBA.org, I think. Those are great resources. They have 3 people there that will meet with you and will help you set up your business plan and start a practice. They see what it is. They want you to, you know, I doubt it more recently, but it seems like the United States is does support, you know, private practitioners and small business owners more. You know, the country's kind of built on that. And sometimes it seems like they get away from it a little bit, but I do wholeheartedly believe that they have you in their best interests. And so there's a lot of government organizations where they will help you get set up with loans that way and things like that as well. As far as when we initially set up the business, Melanie and I had some money that we had in savings that we put into the business. I did set up a line of credit, a business line of credit I set up with a bank that we never ended up having a draw on. So that was good. You can set up a line of credit. You don't have to pay anything. There's no closing. You do nothing until you make your first draw. Then if you don't need it, you don't have to use it. Other stuff, when we were lucky, we had a couple things going for us. A, she had a good job. So we lived off her salary for a while when we first opened up. We had a little bit of cash that we could put into it to start up the business. And those are basically things that got us by without having to borrow money. If you don't have to borrow money to do it, I would not borrow money to do it. It doesn't make sense. I have friends that have borrowed huge amounts of money to start the private practice, and then they're paying off these loans for 6 years, and that's what they're doing. They're writing checks to pay those off. It really is not, I don't think it's worth it. If you can finance it on your own, I think it's a better way to start to do it. We also ran up big balances on no interest fee credit cards. You're going to buy a lot of products for your practice, go get 18-month no interest credit cards, you know, run up $15,000 on them and try to pay them off before the balance balloons before you have to pay them off. It's not a bad idea because you've got to make the payments on it. Don't be stupid and let them draw and come up. If you do that, you're getting free money for 15 months or 18 months. A lot of credit card companies run that stuff. And it seemed like a really good idea for us. It really did work well. We were able to pay that down and get all that money paid off really quickly. When I first opened up the business, I drew no salary for 8 months. I worked for free nonstop for 8 months. Again, we lived off Melanie. I had no income, none at all. So if you look at, you know, the amount of time and I put in between everything, and, you know, honestly, we're probably there at the clinic for, you know, probably 16 hours a day, 5 days a week. There were times when I was working Saturdays and Sundays. I would work, you know, Saturdays 8:30 to 3 and Sundays, you know, 8:30 to noon, and did that for a while. And if you look at the time that you put into it and the time of your lost income, because I wasn't generating any income all that time, it takes you a while to offset that and recoup that money. And we're 6 years in business now, and we started up what I believe is a successful business. And I'd say I'm probably just recouping and breaking even at this point now. It just takes a while. I mean, it's hard to put a number on my time like that and see. I couldn't even tell you how many hours go in it. But again, you know, it gets worth it after a certain amount of time. It certainly becomes more worth it. I would highly recommend that you actually write a business plan, to write a business plan out. Again, the Small Business Development Center is a good resource for doing that. SBA.gov is a good resource for doing that as well. And that's about that on that end. Now, going into business is a completely different animal. I practiced for 9 years before I opened practice. I was in practice, clinical practice for 9 years, and I had experience in managing clinic for 2 years. What I would tell you is if you get out and you think you are A, qualified to manage other people, or B, you think you're going to get out of school and open a private practice, I think you're making a big mistake. What's going to happen is you're going to get so wrapped up in the business side of it that you're going to have no experience as a therapist. And you are going to wake up in 5 years and you're all wrapped up in business and you're going to realize that you are not a good therapist. What you need to do is you need to get out, get some experience. work, practice. You know, there's a couple different avenues to do it. I worked in basically every setting of a nursing home I have worked for. I worked in acute care, home health. I was an outpatient in a couple different settings. I've done a lot of different things. I got experience working. I worked in a couple different outpatient settings. I figured out what I thought was good, how would things run. I worked for practices and said, that is stupid. I would never do that. There was a practice that like, that's a great idea. That's something that I would like to do on my own. And then when we came down to it, we wanted to go to practice with 9 years of experience. I felt like I could really go into it and really start that practice and put a lot into it. I also had 9 years of practicing. I had my OCS already. I had my NPC already. So I thought I could bring a lot to the table for treating my therapists. I had a friend I graduated from school with, and he graduated and he opened up a practice. And he's got a successful practice down in Tampa. He has 2 now, in fact. And he came up here for one of the alumni weekends, and we hung out with him. He said, you know, one of the things that I missed out on, and that I'm jealous of you all, is I felt like I got wrapped up in business, and I never became a good therapist. And he's been in practice for a while now. He's like, I'm trying to become a better therapist now, and I can run a business, and I can do books, and I can watch productivity. He's like, I feel like I don't have time for this now. And I'll tell you that since 2009, probably, I have not taken a clinical class. I haven't taken a treat the shoulder course. I haven't taken anything like that in years. All my classes now are administration, billing, you know, management. They're all on that end of the other. And I love eating that stuff up. I think it's great and taking the classes now. But the nice thing is I got a lot of my clinical information in already, and I took time and really tried to prepare myself as a clinician, so I feel like I can do that stuff now. Good resources for you for outpatient, especially but for billing. I know somebody had asked that question. And good clinical resources. One of them is Farron Levine, FarronLevine.com, and that's Helene Farron and Steve Levine, who I don't know if you guys heard, but very unfortunately he passed away recently. He had a car accident in Central America. He was a great guy. He was a fantastic guy. And I've met and I've talked to him, had conversations with him. The billing program that him and Helene Farron produced, I actually used in our office, Optimus PT, which is a really good web-based program. And they have a website and they do consulting and things like that. But they're excellent resources. In fact, one of the first courses I took was from Steve on administration, and it was on outpatient billing and coding and things like that. And a lot of information that I learned came from Steve. And Helene's a great resource also. Another good one is Gowenda Seminars. And his name is Rick Gowenda, and he's done a lot of auditing for Medicare, he's done auditing for different hospitals. I think he's actually been a consultant for Medicare also. When people get busted for Medicare fraud, he's one of the people that does the remediation for those offices. And I think a lot of courses from him too. You know, I'm a big advocate of if you're Medicare compliant, you're going to be compliant across the board. So we try to write all our notes Medicare compliant. We do all our billing Medicare compliant. There's little things with that. There are other billing guidelines you can use for the private ones, the AMA guidelines, as I mentioned. But if you're Medicare compliant, you're going to be compliant across the board for the most part. So, you know, if a private insurance or workers' comp insurance came to me and they questioned something, and you were to say, well, we are following Medicare guidelines, they don't really have any kind of a stand on it to say, well, we're not going to pay for that or whatever. If you're following Medicare guidelines, that doesn't make any sense at all. So those resources are really good resources as far as becoming Medicare compliant, learning a lot about billing, which I think is super important. Billing and coding is just of the utmost importance. Knowing what you're doing, which is also my understanding that you guys do not get a lot of training that when you come out of school. And, you know, I was told by the people here, administrators here, that that's not education, that's continuing education. And then I don't buy that. And I was also told that they're supposed to get that when they go on their outpatient internship. Well, some of you don't even have outpatient internships. Some of you have 20 outpatient internships. So how are you going to get them there if you're not there with the right practitioner? So, you know, I think it's really good to educate yourself in that. How to become an efficient coder, how to become an efficient builder. It's It's a big part of being a good clinician. Being a good clinician is not just going to work, showing up on time, dressing nice, and having a skillful, being skilled with your therapist or with your patient. Being a good clinician is dealing with insurance companies, dealing with doctors, being efficient with your billing, being efficient with your coding, being efficient with your time. There are so many things that I count in being a good clinician, and it is not just clinical skills. You don't just walk into a room with somebody and do a cuboid whip on their foot and walk out and do this and you're done. It doesn't work that way. Okay, there's too much stuff involved in being that. And that's the stuff that really makes you a good clinician and that will put you above. That's the stuff that would make you valuable for me. For me, if you're not a good clinician coming in, then I want to build you a good clinician. And if I don't see an opportunity to do that, then you're not the right fit for that practice. One of the questions that was posed to me is what would I look for in a new graduate? And I just hired a new graduate. I just hired Daniel Leach, who worked there, and Daniel's awesome. I love Daniel to death. What I would look for in a new graduate is somebody, who, when you first get out of school, I don't, and I think back to when I first got out of school, and I thought I had this clinical skill set. This is what I didn't get out of what I thought I did. When you guys get out of school, you don't have a clinical skill set. So you're going to be good with patients by your rapport with the patient. You're going to have a personality that you're going to get along with patients. You need to convince that patient that you're going to be able to help them get better, even if your skills are not there yet. You're not going to tell them I'm not very skilled, but I'm a really nice person. But you need to have that opportunity to be able to be that person and talk to your patients that way. That is what you have when you first get out. If you don't have that, I would try to work on it. I don't know if it's something that can be learned. That's one thing that I'm going to look for in people. I want to see somebody that my patients can believe in and that they can trust, and that when doctors send patients over to my office, I can have faith that when they see that person, that they're going to take good care of that patient. And despite the fact all your patients aren't going to walk out the door getting better. If your patient walks out the door and they think that you gave 110% to their care, then that's going to carry you over very, very far. Because all your patients are not getting better. That's very important in our practice and the way we run our model. I want to look for somebody who's stable. I don't want to be replacing people all the time. It's a pain in my life. It costs me money. I have to get people credentialed. I have to train people. I don't want turnover in my practice. So I'm going to look for somebody who's stable, somebody who I don't think is going to be leaving this community, somebody who I think I have a future with in this community and in this practice. And honestly, getting out of being a good graduate, those are probably my two primary things that I'm looking for in a new graduate if they were to come in there and they were to apply there at my clinic. As a new graduate getting out, what I would look for is I would look for an opportunity where you can go somewhere and learn. If you go to a practice and they say, okay, we've got a good job for you, and you're going to be the therapist here, and you've got 4 PTAs and 7 techs, and they're going to help you out. You're the only therapist. You're going to be doing evals, or you're going to be doing re-evals, you're not going to do anything else. You're never going to learn how to manage a client. You're never going to learn how to go from eval through discharge with a client and manage them throughout the whole spectrum of their care. You are not going to become a better therapist in an environment like that. You want to be somewhere where there's senior clinicians. You want to be somewhere. I try as hard as I can, and I do it probably 3 days a month. I meet with Daniel, my new graduate. I meet with him at lunch, and we have lunch together at least 3 times a month. I try to do it every single Thursday. It doesn't always work out because I get busy, or stuff happens, and there's something about business. But and he understands that I try to meet with him because I'm invested in Daniel, and he took me time after his money to get into the practice. And so I want him to feel that recognition. He meets, he has questions that he lines up, and we sit down and we talk about things. How's this patient going? How's that patient going? Do you have questions about this? I saw you do this in the gym the other day. This is a better idea. This is a better way to do that. And there's like little things that I picked up in being a clinician over the years, I think really helps out, like just how to manage a client. I joke and I've talked to people before about like I can be a chameleon in there with my clients. And you have somebody who comes in and they are just not happy. They're miserable. And they're just not a happy person. And they might be cursing their doctor and things like that. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity to turn this person around and to help this person out and make them believe in the healthcare system. And I can be that person and try to get them to buy into what are we doing? What am I trying to do here with you? And this is what my purpose here. This is what your doctor's doing here. Your doctor only spent 4 minutes with you. That's okay. You're here with me now. You're going to spend a lot of time with me. And then when you go back to your doctor, I'll send them a note and I'll tell them where we need to go from here. And that's my type of person. And again, I joke, I say it's a chameleon. Like you have to be all that person for everybody walking. Everybody who comes through the door, you've got to be the person that they need in front of you. People come in and they're crying in front of you, I'm going to hand them a tissue. You know, they hand them a tissue, they're like, look, let's help you out with this. What can we do right now to help you get better? And, you know, people they might be emotionally labile. One of the things that occurs to me when they come in is that, you know, sometimes you've got this life in your hand, you've got this guy, and his whole life revolves around playing tennis, and he just has a couple of years. Or he's a tennis pro. He has rotator cuff here. I mean, it's not a joke. This is not, it's not, you know, you can't take that lightly. This is his entire life. If you don't do your job with his shoulder, he is never going to be a tennis pro again. This is not something to take lightly. I'm very, very aware of customer service also. You know, and when you go into an environment, what you see as good customer service. You know, when you go to a good restaurant, you know a good restaurant, you know a fast restaurant. A lot of times it revolves around the service that you get and the food that you get there. And you might go to a bad restaurant and get bad food, but if you have good service, you're going to have a different opinion. And so, you know, I'm always talking to my therapist also, my staff also, like, when they come in, you smile, you say, hello, how are you doing today? What can I do for you today? If I have a patient and I know that they're getting an MRI on Thursday, I'll call them up Friday and say, how'd your MRI go? That goes so far in making that patient believe that you actually care. I call it constant communication. There's constant communication. We have little tickle sheets that come out with patients' names on there. If you have a patient's name that's on there that you haven't seen in a week, you better make a phone call to them. And I want them to know that you are checking in on them. You had a doctor's appointment on Thursday. How'd your doctor's appointment go? Okay, what's going on now from there? Those things go so far. I can't tell you how many times I've had a patient that might have been out of my sight for a week or 10 days or something like that, and I'll call them. And they're so grateful that I reached out to them and that I was actually thinking about them. You have no idea how far that goes. That patient is going to tell their brother, their sister, their kids, and every single one of their friends that don't go anywhere else, go over there. They're going to tell their doctor, don't go anywhere else, go over there. You know, a lot of times doctors are wanting people off on you. Okay, go over there, go see them, and see what they can do. If that patient goes back to them and they had a bad experience at your clinic, that doctor is not going to be happy. Because now that patient is complaining to them about having a bad experience at that practice. It's going to go so far if you have developed that rapport. They go back and they say, gosh, you know, it's clean. They say hi to me. My therapist is on the spot all the time. They are never late. At 1:45 when my appointment time starts, they are there. They are there. You know, they called me. They followed up. Doctor's never going to send anybody anywhere else. Okay? 2,300 visits over the past 7 years have ended up somewhere else. All the practices that were in business before that did a crappy job. Okay? Because those 23 visits went somewhere else. Those are all doctors that were sending patients elsewhere. Obviously, were not satisfied with the care they were getting. If I have a patient and I have a doctor and he sends someone somewhere else, I take that very personally. I feel like I didn't do my job. Michelle and I just ran into one of my old patients downstairs. She's going to therapy downstairs there. I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, why didn't he come back to me? You know, and that's killing me. Oh, why hasn't he come back to me? You know what? I'll probably call him later and say, hey, can you tell me why you didn't come back to see me again? Was it something I did? Or did the doctor tell you you have to go over here, which happens sometimes? But, you know, why didn't you, and if it's a doctor that said, no, you have to go over here, but I'm going to try to reach out to that doctor and be like, well, you know, why are you telling my patients they have to go somewhere else? You know, let me introduce myself, and this is our practice and how we run. But that's kind of eating me up right now as I'm sitting here talking to you guys. And it's good. I'm glad that it's eating me up, because if it wasn't eating me up, then I would be bad at my job and I would not be running a good business. If you see a patient and they go somewhere else, you should be upset about that. Why are they going somewhere else? And take that, you know, take it personally. There's nothing wrong with taking it personally. You're investing yourself in that. You're going to be in private practice, you're going to run a business, you're going somewhere else, you have to be that person. You are not just, I'm not saying that you're going to go to acute care and not care about your job. Not what I'm saying at all. But you get a lot of these people, they just go to work and they walk home and that's it. They check out, they're done. They check out and they're not there anymore, and that's it. I did my job for the day, I'm done with business. And you're not, you can't be that in private practice. You can't do it. If we don't have patients coming in, and we don't have a business, then I don't have an income. So I'm going to figure out every way that I can, and those are all things that I'm good service, and I'm going to buy into and be passionate about when I'm there. I wholeheartedly believe in developing long-term relationships with physicians. You have to develop these relationships with these referral sources so that when the next practice opens up here in town, and I guarantee another practice is going to open up here in town, I'm not concerned that the doctors that are referred to me are going to send somewhere else. Okay, I have to believe that I've done such a good job with their patients that they are not going to send a patient elsewhere. Otherwise, I'm in trouble. Where I can't run a business that way. And you've got direct access, yes, but you still need a doctor on board after 30 days, and we still very much rely on physicians for our referral sources. And and it's because of my staff. It's not me. It's because of my staff that I have. We have done such a good job of getting doctors to buy into our model for what we do out there, that we've got doctors who are on board. We've got doctors who don't go anywhere else. You're going to waste your time to go somewhere else. Go out there and go see the patient. I know you're going to get best there. And they know that when the patient goes back to them, that the patient's going to go back and they're going to have a positive experience of how they did in therapy. One of the bad things about therapy is that way back in the 90s, and even now, it's still bad, but in the 90s, therapists were probably awful. Okay, they just milked the system, which is why Medicare clamped down on them. They saw patients for 82 visits. They billed the heck out of Medicare. They basically robbed the system. And they were making millions of dollars off. And those days are gone now. That's why the Balanced Budget Act came out in 1997. That's why all these reforms are going on in Medicare and continue to get down on it. 4 of the top 9 billed CPT codes are physical therapy codes. TheraX, Manual, and NeuroVA. Those are 4 of the top 9 billed CPT codes. So when they're looking for chances to cut down money, that's when they're going to cut down money. They're going to cut it on the codes that are billed a lot. And that's why there's all these functional reporting now. People are asking, why all this stuff is coming down on therapists. And it's because of these therapists did such a bad job. They ran these practices so poorly and unethically. There's still a lot of practices out there that run unethically. There's still a lot of practices that see 2 people an hour and go for it. And they get away with it. And I mean, if we saw 2 people an hour, I'd be chilling right now. And it's just, we're not going to do it. I'm not going to have that model. You know, Melanie laughed kind of sarcastically and called me Mr. Ethics. But I just don't want to run a practice like that. I don't feel comfortable doing that. It doesn't seem to be the right thing to do. I've had people approach me and they're like, you can sell back braces out of your clinic and you can pick up the back braces for $42 and you can sell them for $250. You know, you're super, you'll do it. I'm like, well, that's why Medicare is broke. But I'm not going to contribute that system. We're going to buy back braces and I'm going to give it to my clients at cost. Because I'm not interested in making money on them. And I'm not interested in pilfering Medicare for $190 for a back brace. Look at the TV now. Look at the ads on TV. You have Medicare, you need a knee brace? Call us. And you can get a knee brace from them, and they're going to bill Medicare, and they're going to have a neoprene brace that costs $14. They're going to bill Medicare $190. And that's why the system is going broke. So don't be one of those people that contribute to it. It's not a good person. It comes down to that. So I told you guys I would get winded. We've got a little bit of time left. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask? Yes, sir.
I got a bunch of questions.
Ask me one.
But one question is that they talked about you had worked for 9 years and did 2 years of business. What do you suggest with going into an area that you previously don't know? If you said you came to St. Augustine, were those 9 years in this area to develop your referral sources?
No, the question was basically, developing referral sources in the area and going into a blind area like I did coming here to St. Augustine. I went blind to St. Augustine. I had practice at 2 different practices here in town already, and then a move that I did. So I practiced for, I taught here. I used to teach with Dr. Jackson in modality. And I started working here in 2006. So I was working in town here for all of 6, all of 7, all of 8. So I was here for 3 years already. And another move that I made that I thought was really, really good is I did home health. Like basically what happened to me is I worked for a practice and I had a non-compete contract slapped on me, which I don't believe in. I think they're ridiculous. If I have to go through a non-compete to work for me and to stay there, and they don't want to work there when they have non-compete, then I don't want them there. If I need somebody in non-compete in order to keep them there, then why don't I, if they're that good, why don't I just take them a better offer together to keep them there? So I think non-competes are garbage for the method. And they wouldn't stand up for this county anyway. But anyway, I was working somewhere else, and somebody gave me a non-compete, and I'm like, oh, that's not a non-compete, that's absurd. And that basically forced me out. I'm like, well, I'm not going to work here anymore. And then I left, and what I did was I got a job doing home health. And developed a relationship with a home health agency, and I met some physicians through that, and I had already practiced for 3 years already. And so when I opened up my practice, I put that in the paper. And I said, I'm going to private practice, I'm opening up business on my own. And I had old patients contacting me and calling and coming in and want to come in, I want to come see you, blah, blah, this, that. And it just grew from there. It just got bigger. And then I hired another therapist who I practiced in town for a while. She's a fantastic therapist, and she had a bit of a following. And I'm lucky now. Like, I do not take blind referrals. I take no patients that I don't know anymore. I've gotten to the point that the only patients that I take are patients who I've seen before, or it's like somebody, or it's like an office manager at a doctor's office, or it's a physician or physician's wife, and things like that. The only time I ever take blind referrals is when all my other therapists are so packed, they are packed to the nine, and they cannot see another patient, and my staff knows that, they understand that, and then they'll send, and then I'll see one of those patients. But I've gotten that lucky, and my other therapist, Amanda, she basically the same way. She only gets patients that she goes with. And so, my goal for the other therapist is you guys need to be so good that patients want to come back here and see you. And then you don't take anybody else. And then somebody else has to come in, they have to see all the other people. And then that's basically how you go to practice. That's it. So I was practicing here in town for a while. I had a bit of a client backlist already here in town. And you need that. That's why I recommend that you go into business for a while. It's kind of tough to go to a private practice and work for somebody else in private practice and then open up shop and compete against them. You certainly can do it. I ended up doing it, but that's because we did not get along well. We did not end well there, so that was fun. But if you're working for somebody who's really good and you really appreciate the practice, something they might want to talk about is there a business? Is there a partnership opportunity in this practice? Or you go somewhere like with me, I'm not going to work forever. I look at when I hire a new therapist, I'm like, is this the person that I can end up selling my practice? Is this somebody who down the line is going to take over the practice? I'm going to have to do something with it. And my retirement package is my business. Right? That's my financial, that's my retirement package right there. So we build a business, and then if it's worth a certain value, you can create a value. That's like my 401k right there, basically. So you're going to find somebody who's going to come in and take over that business at some point and take it over. So I'm always looking for that person and that person coming into the door. And my model initially was to bring in partners. And I have offered partnerships with somebody already, and they didn't want it because they knew what I was going through, what I was going through. And that's fine. I offered it to them. It was on the table, and they turned it down. And then I ended up offering it to other people in the future also to try to figure out clever business models to get partners in there. That's the best way to do it. That's the best way to do it. Then everybody's invested in the practice. Everybody's invested. It's not the job they go to. They're invested in the practice because now they're owner of the practice. And does anybody else have a question? Yes.
I have a question for one of the submissions.
Yep.
I wanted to know how much resources in terms of finances you should have before you decide to open up.
We opened up, the question was how much financial resources do you need when you open up a practice? And there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. You need to get equipment to open up your practice. If you're going to try to pay yourself a salary, that's a big cookie in a resource right there. Once you get up and running, you're going to have to pay rent, utilities, things like that. And you're going to have to pay somebody like the receptionist in the beginning once you get busy enough to run your front office and to do things like that. So all I can tell you is what we did. I probably put out $20,000 for capital expenditures on equipment and things like that when we first started. And Melanie and I gave the business a loan. It was called a loan from the shareholder for $40,000. That was basically our operating capital right there. So that was money that was in the bank. Because when you first start seeing patients, you're going to have your money going. You know, Medicare should pay you within 3 weeks. But I mean, I'm still getting paid on some water from 4 years ago. So you're not going to have money. So you don't see somebody and all of a sudden money appears in the bank 3 days later. It doesn't work that way. So you're going to have some time when you have operating capital to run your business in the meantime. So you're paying your bills and you're running everything and you don't have income coming in. That's why I don't think it makes sense. It's really good if you have a wife who can support you or a husband that can support you, because then I really live off her salary for a while. That's why if you're going to try to pay yourself in the beginning, that becomes exhausting. If you're going to try to open up a business and pay yourself, I mean, good luck with that. Because you're trying to make an income, and you're trying to see this, and you're going to pay this. I think that was one of the things that allowed us to get by, is I got income for basically 8 months. When we first started to pay off the loan first, and then I actually started to pay myself a salary, which was not a lot at the beginning. I pay myself less than the median income for therapists. Okay, I don't make $85,000 a year as far as my income. Now, the clinic profits also, and I end up making more than the median income because of that. But my salary is actually less than that. And I need to keep it down there. It doesn't make any sense for me to pay myself a big salary and pay taxes on all that money. Then if we have a bad year, all I'm doing is paying a lot of taxes on all that money. It makes more sense to have. My accountant told me that basically the federal government won't give you grief if you're like a 55-45 split between what your profit margin is and what you're making as a salary. So basically, that's kind of your window. If you pay yourself $25,000 a year and you make $100,000 profit, the government will come, because you're avoiding paying taxes and all that money. So you can squeeze around and stuff like that. And all this business stuff I learned on the fly. I had no business experience in the beginning. No. I opened up a bit. I mean, I did like a little personal training thing. That wasn't a business. And so I kind of learned it. You just learn it on the fly, and you just operate it, and dealing with people and networking and talking to other people that know about business and stuff like that. You'll get it, you know, half the brain, you'll figure it out, you'll get smarter and smarter, and you'll pick it up. And that's another reason why I think it's very important to go to a therapist before you try to do it. Because you don't want your brain becoming a big therapist and trying to run a business. That's not going to work. Questions? Yeah.
Going off of Matt's question, when you speak to the importance of having partners, why did you then choose to open your own business alone? Or did you seek out a partner in the beginning?
I did seek out a partner. Eric Chaconis was going to open it.
Cool.
But Eric got a job as a faculty member here, and honestly, it was going to be easier for him, and he wanted to go that path. But when we first opened up business, Eric and I were going, we were looking at properties, we were looking at Valencia, we were driving around, and the funny story I tell everybody is that, and then Eric's like, you know, I got a faculty job, I'll be off full time, there's probably a lot of risk involved in it. He wasn't there at the time, he didn't have a wife to live off of. And so, he pulled out at one point, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do it on my own then, I'll go. And in the beginning, I sat in Eric's office and we put a map up on his wall. And Eric went through the phone book and I put push pins in the map and we mapped out every single clinic that was here in St. Augustine. And there were 13 practices within 1 mile of Flagler Hospital. And so when I'm looking, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be within a mile of Flagler Hospital. It makes no sense. And I mean, so I did have a partner in mind when I first did it. A partner in mind, I think was good because that's a lot of risk. If it was somebody else, nice, that's either going to go down with you or going to succeed with you. Either way, but I'll tell you that in retrospect, I'm glad that I didn't partner because I think that partner probably would be a nightmare, and I'll never give up more than 50% of the visit. It doesn't make any sense to do that. It doesn't make any sense at all. And then just running the business and decisions and things like that, I think would be difficult. So as I've been partnered, then there'll be like a junior partnership track where I'm making the majority of the decisions still, and then you kind of phase them in over time and they start to get an idea of it, picking that right person. So to answer your question again, I thought about it in retrospect. I think that I'm glad I didn't open up with a partner. Actually, I guess it's not. I don't think I should talk about it, but Debbie Jackson and I talked about it also. And I had a business already, and she was working for Rebound already. And we were open for like 3.5 years already. She practiced out of my office, when she left Rebound before she opened up her office. She went out there, she saw all the clients there, she was Denver Jackson Therapy Associates there, and started Rehab, and started to run her business. And she's always been very grateful to me that they were happy. We have such a good working relationship. We probably have breakfast together, every couple of months and just talk about business and things like that. Without my hands off. So you can have relationships with that with other business owners in the area. I think it's a great thing to do. We talk about other people and what's going on in the community, and I heard the practices opening up and things like that. And it's really good to have another resource like that. And she's a great resource. She's been working in private practice for so long. She's an awesome resource. What we talked about too, we just couldn't settle on the situation. And there's no bad blood there at all. We talk all the time there. So I think if you can do it without a partner, I would recommend doing it without a partner. So I think it probably can turn into a problem, down the line. And then all the other little things, like all the little things about the business, I don't even know how to work it as a partner. Once I start to get that situation, I don't even know how to work. But all the little things you run through your business, I wouldn't even know how to even start with that. So I think it's probably better off to do it without one. Anybody else? Yeah.
Well, kind of two. So, what would your advice be when negotiating salaries for a new grad, and also what's the salary?
So, the question was advice regarding negotiating the salary for new grad, and what is the starting range for a new grad. I'll say the starting range for new grad is going to be variable. It depends on your environment that you're in, where you live geographically, and where you are. Nursing homes are probably going to be paying, upwards of $40 an hour or something like that. At my clinic, I start my new grad at $31 an hour. I have a cushy clinic. I have a very cushy clinic. And for the most part, they know that it's a cush job. Home health in the state of Florida, you can't do home health, but within your first year. But it's really going to vary geographically. If you live in Manhattan, you're going to make more than that. That's why that median income salary for the ABTA, that's such a low number. Because that $85,000 takes into account people are making $130,000 in Manhattan, but their cost of living is 7 times as much as mine too, and that's offset. And in fact, insurance companies pay more depending on where people live. Like Medicare has got 3 rates in the state of Florida. They've got a rate for Fort Lauderdale, they've got a rate for Miami, and they've got another rate that's called Rest of Florida. They pay us less than people in Miami get. And that's reasonable, because people in Miami pay more to live, and so Medicare realizes that. So your starting salary is going to be variable depending on where you are. As far as negotiating a starting salary, if you come to my clinic and you have a good job, just say, yeah, that's okay. But if you go somewhere else, the thing is, a lot of it's going to be dependent on what can you bring to the table when you're there. I don't have a whole bunch of leeway in paying my therapist because of the way we run. We run on a 45-minute schedule. And so, again, every time you're going to commit, it costs me $60. So there's not a lot of wiggle room at my office. And I give raises. I give really good bonuses to people at the end of the year. I try to go hourly well because we are a profit organization. As far as negotiating your salary with them, I think what I would recommend doing is trying to get feelers out on what else is out there. You have to take into account the value of being in an organization where you might get some really good mentorship, and that costs money. Every time I sit down and I meet with Daniel over lunch, typically I need to take a patient over lunch. So every time I meet with Daniel over lunch, it's basically costing me money because I'm not seeing somebody. And that's got value. I would appreciate if there was a minute it's all about value in that, in the environment that they're going to be in. And that certainly holds a lot. I can't emphasize you guys enough when you get out, trying to find an environment where you're going to be able to grow. I told you my first job where I was seeing 50 patients an hour. I learned because I had patients that were coming in, but then I really learned how to get that client. I learned how to scramble. I learned how to, make sure that my brain was going 7 different directions at once. That's what I learned how to do. I didn't learn how to become a better therapist. I learned to become a better therapist my second job where I saw 1 patient an hour. And I could really sit down and ask Melanie when we were first in that job. In that job, I used to go home and I would sit there and I would read and Hurtley and Kessler at home. You know, because I felt like all of a sudden I wasn't in school, it wasn't getting shoved down my throat, and I actually had an opportunity to learn this information, not just try to be cited on a test. And I did. I would go home and I'd read this. I'm like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. I see that in the clinic now. I spent a lot of that time trying to learn it a little better therapist and put out as much info as I could possibly put out. So hopefully that's helpful with your question. So I would try, you know, I would realize value in the environment that you're going to be in this type of setting. Realize that outpatient is not going to pay as much as the other settings because our reimbursement is not as much. Home health, every time you walk through the door with home health is paying $128. Okay? You walk through the door, they get $128. So it's no doubt that home health can pay therapists $65 to $70 to walk in there. I tell my therapist, I'm like, I pay you more percentage-wise than you get in home health. And I can't pay you $70, then I'll get $70. If you break it down by percentage, I pay you a lot more than they get. If you look at these practices where people are seeing 24 patients in a day, I pay you a lot more than they're getting. For what you do, I pay you a ton more than what they're getting. Because they might be making $15,000 more a year than you, but they're seeing twice as many patients. If you see twice as many patients, I can certainly afford to pay you, $140,000 a year. You're working 80 hours a week. That's great. I need to do that. So I mean, there's monetary value in those situations. Those are part of situations that you want to get in, gain experience. And it's my understanding that a lot of you guys travel. I don't think traveling is a bad idea at all. They pay you. You have a chance to make some money, get out there. You can see some different stuff. I think it's a good idea to travel and go around a little bit. You don't know where you're going to go, but then go and try to lay some foundation in the environment that you are going to be in when and try to lay that foundation there. Lay some foundation there for a little while before you go and before you try to practice. And that like, is a really good idea. I can probably take another question. I've got a 1:30 meeting that I'm going to be at. Does anybody else have a question? Yes, go ahead.
I know cash PT is getting pretty popular around the country. I don't know if you have any experience with that or if you can speak to whether
you guys know about cash PT? I think cash PT is great. I know Steve really well. I worked for Steve Spaghetti for a while. I have a great relationship with Steve. He's a great therapist. And he runs basically a cash-based business over there. A couple things. A, you better be in a community where people have cash, where they can actually pay money. It's going to float a little bit here in St. Augustine, but it's going to get capped at a certain point here. If you're in Ponte Vedra or Beverly Hills or something like that, that probably will work really well. The other thing about cash-based PT is that you're going to run into some issues. First of all, Medicare patients aren't going to pay you cash for this. Because they have Medicare, they work their whole life with Medicare. They're going to utilize the benefits that they might deserve. If you have somebody who's got insurance, you're going to have a hard time getting them in and having them pay $60 a visit when they come in, when they've got insurance that they can go somewhere else and they can utilize their insurance for that. But I think it's a great idea. I think it's the way in the future. We do some cash-based therapy out there. But clients will come in, or clients who their deductible is so high that they want to pay to come in anyway. That's fine. And we see it like that. No problem with that. The nice thing about cash is they make cash for like that. Insurance companies, if it doesn't get denial from a private insurance company, your turnaround is probably a month. If it gets denied, your turnaround could be 6 months. So when they pay cash, now you've got the money, you got it, you go to the bank like that, it's good. You don't have to worry about any of the little middle avenues being cut off of that pocket right there. So I think it's the way in the future, especially as the payment system evolves. What's probably going to happen with the payment system is they're going to go to a pay-for-performance system. So what they're doing right now is they're doing what's called functional reporting, and everybody should have been doing this the whole time anyway. They learned they're terrible therapists. But they're making everybody report like outcome measures, functional outcome measures when they come in and when they leave, and Medicare is tracking this now. And they're looking at when they come in and their outcome measure was between 1 and 19%, they left it at 0%, well, that's a patient that they improved it. And they're monitoring all that right now. They're gathering data. And my guess is that probably by around 2020 or so, you're going to see that they're going to go to a pay-for-performance system where, you're going to get, it's going to be based on the number of visits that you see clients. They're going to get into levels of involvement, whereas like if you like a doctor, doctors have level 1 through 6 visit codes. If it's a level 6, it took a lot of time, it's very involved. Somebody coming in with chest pain and things like that. Their level 1 is someone coming in with sniffles. They're going to go to that with PT. And if somebody comes in with very involved stroke, they're going to be a level, I don't know how they're going to do it, they're going to be a level 6 visit. If somebody comes in with a run-of-the-mill post-op scope, that's a level 1 visit. They're going to pay you different depending upon the intensity of the visit, and it should take you less time to see those less intense visits also. So it should work its way out, and then they're going to pay you based on your performance, on progress that you're making with the patient, on their functional improvement, and how that's getting documented, how that's getting measured. They're probably going to be what happens in the future. And I don't really know how I feel about it. I kind of feel okay about it. You know, we work really hard with these outcome measures, whatever. And we have a very low average number of visits. Our average number of visits per patient is just under 11. It's like 10.4. And that's pretty low as far as practice are concerned. That includes, you know, stroke patients that may be seen 30 times. And I mean, I'm only looking at my patients. And, you know, a lot of times I'm like, what visit 8 or 9? I'm like, God, my patient's almost better. They're ready for discharge already. And I feel pretty good about that. You know, I just look at it, I'm like, I mean, I know that's above the norm. So I think that we're going to be fine in a model like that. If you're doing the right things the way that they're supposed to be done, I think the model will be viable and be something that, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see what happens as time goes on. But that goes to trying to develop other lines of income. For me, it's North of Drummond, which has grown. It's a great line of income for us. Marsh Creek is going to grow. You know, I'll bet you money in 3 years I've got a full-time therapist at Marsh Creek. And I'll be going over there and see patients there and full-time job. And that's fantastic for me. I mean, it's just a great avenue to go in. I'm not going to have any overhead for that practice. And they're going to go over there. And my model for that was basically they've got the facility. I said every time I see a patient here, I'll give you X amount of dollars. That's it. So I have no overhead. I'm not going to staff it with a receptionist. The therapist goes over there and sees the patient. We pay this amount of money. So I'm not paying anything. That's a good way to go. I had a friend out west, and they latched on to health clubs. I don't know what health clubs they were. They started putting a PT in all these gyms. Yeah, I went to school with guys. They were clever. They were just like 6, 7, 8, 10. I don't know how many practices they have now in Southern California. But they put a PT in all these gyms. They went to the gym, developed a corporate relationship with them, and said, I want to put a therapist in your gym. I want to pay you $7 every time you see a patient. You're going to get more members in here. We're going to discharge them to your facility. They have no overhead. They probably have a reception that might be in the central booking area somewhere. But they don't pay for the gym. They don't pay rent. They don't pay anything. If they're not seeing a patient there, they're not paying for it. It's a brilliant model. A really smart model. I think that's really clever model. You get away from overhead. I have got to go, but I'll tell you one more thing. A practice my size would not run if I didn't have one therapist. If you're going to have an outpatient practice, and you're going to have equipment, and you're going to have a physical location, you're going to have a treadmill, you're going to have a upper body ergometer, you're going to have some tables and things like that, that costs money. And you're not going to be able to fund it on your own. If you're going to have an 8x10 room somewhere, and that's all you're going to have, that's fine. But you're not, you're never going to grow. What are you going to do with a practice like that? But if you want to be that, if you want to have that, that's great. If you just want to be yourself, practice on your own, be a private practitioner, and work there for a while, I mean, that's fine. But if you want to have any kind of outpatient clinic with any growth potential, you've got to have other therapies. It's not possible if you don't have that. You'll just chill yourself trying to make your margins be. I'm at the window now where it's reached a point for me that it works out. And now it's at the point where it works out. And now when I add another therapist on, it's probably not going to do anything for me with business. I'm not going to make any money next time I add therapists. Because all it's going to be is somebody else going to pay their salary, but stuff is covered and things like that, and it's probably just going to offset a little bit more of my costs. But then if I grow a little bit more than that, then it will probably, it kind of ebbs and flows. Like you get up and now all of a sudden you kind of get static for a while, then when you add a little bigger, it'll probably grow, then you're getting static for a while, and it does those sort of things. But that was the last thing, for practice my size, it would not work if I didn't have, 115 other hours of people seeing patients in my practice and generating income and paying my receptionist, paying my rent, paying my utilities, paying to have my walls painted, all that, paying for my billing. Otherwise, this is not going to be. Okay, I'm sorry, I gotta run. I gotta go. Okay.